Hi, this is Dr. Butch Rosser, and welcome back to the next chapter of Heartburn University. And as we go to the title slides here, you will see that in this chapter, we're going to give you the ins and outs of heartburn so you can know what doctors know as to what causes gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD or GERD. Now let's look at this slide. Let's see what GERD is. Well, first of all, it's a condition where the stomach contents, they actually leak backwards into your food tube or your esophagus. All right, there's my John Madden thing. The esophagus is the key word. Now, next, I want you to know that there's a lower esophageal sphincter, or a trap door, that is between your food tube and your stomach. And it's supposed to prevent food from moving backwards into the esophagus. That's right. It should be a one-way valve. One way. And that should be going down rather than coming up. Now, the other thing I want you to know about this lower esophageal sphincter, or LES, is that it is a muscle. That's right. And if it is a muscle, it can be weak or it can be strong. When it is weak or does not close well, it does not do its job well, guess what? That allows those food contents in the stomach to come back into, what's that word? Esophagus or your food tube. Now, let's go on to the next slide. What's bad about all this is that this fluid, this food content in the stomach, as it comes back up into the esophagus, okay, that magic word here, you can have irritation and you can have damage. That's what's the big deal. That's the problem. Now, sometimes you have these obvious symptoms where you have this bad chest pain, it's burning, you're coughing, all these things, but sometimes it can be silent. And you can have breathing difficulties and other difficulties that are what we call the silent symptoms. Now, what's actually going on? I want to take a deeper dive into what's going on anatomically when you have reflux. So bear with me as we go here to this animation. Here we are, the food is going down the food tube. And here is the food tube, or what's that word? The esophagus. It starts with an E. All right? Now, as the food goes down even more, you enter into another zone here of things I want you to know about. Here we have that sphincter right here with these little striations here to represent a muscle. And it's called the LES, the lower esophageal sphincter. Here's all the food content here. And this muscle is supposed to stop this food content from coming back up here. So let's go ahead now and break this down and shows what happens in the process. Now look, when you do not do your job, look what happens. As we actually froze it, just like John Madden in the telestrator, and look at this acid come back up in the food tube where it does not belong. That's what's going on as you come back, and I want you to focus on me right now. That's what's going on when you are actually having reflux. And really that tells you why this is an actual mechanical problem for a lot of people and not necessarily an acid problem. And you need to hold on to that fact because it can play a role in how we treat you. Now we're going to go back to the slides, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and erase this. And we're going to just move on here. Now, what I want to do as you look at me is that I want you to know your body's natural protective mechanisms. See, there's some natural barriers that the Lord above put in your body to help stop you from having reflux. Because really, everybody has reflux from time to time, but we can overcome it because we have some natural protective mechanisms. Now, what I want you to do now is come with me to the telestrator. I want to show you these natural protective mechanisms, okay? So here we have a picture that shows the food tube. Remember that? That's the food tube or the esophagus, right? But really, the protective mechanism that is, well, let me go ahead and just like Dr. Oz told me, I'm going to give you the other players. Got the esophagus. The next one is the diaphragm, which actually surrounds the esophagus. The esophagus or food tube passes through the diaphragm, that big breathing muscle. And so we're representing that by having this on either side. Now, here's that lower esophageal sphincter right here, okay? And of course, this big thing here carrying all this green stuff is the actual stomach. And here you have the food and fluid that's in your stomach. Okay, so now that we're oriented, I want to go over those protective mechanisms, okay? For first one is, and this is supposed to be a man with a big chin. It starts here in the mouth because you have saliva. Saliva. And why do you need saliva? Well, as you come back on me, because I want you to look at me on this, saliva is important because it is a base, and the base counteracts the acid. So you actually have saliva that actually comes down to the area where the acid is, and it neutralizes it. That's right. Now, imagine if you smoke, guess what happens to saliva? It's decreased. So that's why smoking can actually increase heartburn or GERD. See, it's amazing when you know these things, how you can figure out things yourself. Now, as we go back to the slide, I want to go ahead and show you the other most important thing, the esophagus, remember? And the esophagus is very important in pushing anything that comes back up here, pushing it back down. And it's called peristalsis, this natural push or contraction. And that helps to eliminate heartburn, prevent heartburn. Now, the next thing I want you to see is what's that? The diaphragm, okay? It starts with a D. The diaphragm, and you can see here represented on both sides, is important because it helps to support that lower esophageal sphincter, and they all work together to make that trap door strong. So that is also very important. So I want to make this point with you as you go back to me. If you have a hernia, then that strength of that diaphragm is no longer effective. And so having a hernia in the face of heartburn can be a particularly tough issue because it's hard for medicines to overcome that actual structural defect. So these are some of the things that we use to actually in our bodies to help naturally to prevent heartburn. Now let's go to the next slides. Now what I hope you see as we go to the next slides, I want you to understand this, and then you'll understand why this can be a very tough problem. This is GERD or GERD is multifactorial, meaning that there are a lot of different things that come into play to actually cause all those protective mechanisms to be overcome and for you to have injury and suffer heartburn. So it's many things. The one that I talked about was what? Decreased saliva, and smoking can do that. Failure of that sphincter to be strong enough, that can also contribute to the problem. Now, I want you to understand this. 60%, as we go back, 60% of patients have a LES or a valve that is just too weak. The valve is just too weak. But 40% actually have a normal strength of the lower esophageal sphincter, but every now and then, for whatever reasons, the sphincter will become lazy and not do its job. And then all of a sudden, that's when you can actually start having heartburn. So, the other thing I want you to remember, and this is for review, a hiatal hernia. It can make the lower esophageal sphincter weak and not be able to do its job. Poor strength of the pumping power of the esophagus or peristalsis. It can be not up to snuff and cause you not to clear the natural tendency for you to reflux. And last but not least, 30% of the patients just don't pump well. Their food tube doesn't pump well to do what we call clear the esophagus. So all these things, as we come, and I make this point, all these things can gang up on you and cause you to have heartburn. Now we're going to go to the next slide. What does all of this mean? Well, here are the results of all of this not going right. There's slower clearing of the liquid and food from the food tube, and you can have damage. The pain you feel is from damage that is ongoing. And then one other item that can be happening along with this is that if your stomach is not emptying properly, it just makes it worse. So what I've tried to do is to give you the doctor's eye view of the ins and outs of heartburn and what actually is going on. Hopefully this will empower you to go back with your doctor, work with your doctor, and help you to understand what he or she is trying to do to help you win your war against heartburn. This is Dr. Butch Rosser saying thank you, and we'll be back with you for the next chapter of Heartburn University.